Hello, this is your host Akhil Lavluri, and welcome to the brand new episode of the Techospace podcast series. In this podcast episode, for the very first time, talking about a host. I'm someone who's completely pursuing his masters into the data science space. So I'm very much happy and thrilled, to be taking a session on a data science, and really, really thrilled to be collaborating with one of the most eminent and distinguished people in the data science space, Mr. Jonathan Aston, who happens to be the senior data scientist of the company Capgemini Invent, and he's based out of the capital city of Norway, Oslo. So, Jonathan, it gives me an absolute pleasure to welcome you to this podcast episode of mine. So, Jonathan, how are you doing, and how is the winter scene in Oslo right now?
Firstly, thanks so much for having me. I'm very honored, and thank you for the wonderful introduction as well. But yeah, the weather's not too bad at the minute. It's the worst time of the year, so we get the rain and the cold without the snow. So the
Okay.
snow will come soon, then we get to do skiing and things like that. But Oslo's a beautiful place, so I recommend it.
Fantastic. Coincidentally, even I've been to Oslo like exactly 3 years back, 3.5 years back. I've not been in the winter, but I've been in the summer. So
Hmm.
summer is a different vibe altogether. I've not been in winter, but let's see. Do you recommend me to come to Oslo in the winter then?
Yeah, I mean, come in the winter, but don't come at this time of year. Come in February, March, and then you can go skiing.
Okay.
You can enjoy the snow. It's much nicer. I actually moved to Norway because I'm originally from the UK, and I moved
Okay.
around this time, and I was like, wow, Oslo is such a beautiful place, and everyone just kept on telling me like, this is the worst time of year here. So if you like it now, you'll like it in the summer. You'll like it in the winter.
Understood, understood. That's a very good trip advice, Jonathan. So, Jonathan, like without any further ado, let's kick off with our podcast session. All right.
Perfect.
So, Jonathan, let's talk about the timeline of your complete journey in the IT industry.
Yeah, so I started off doing a biology degree, which is not the most common first sort of step into the data science sphere. But for me, it was one which was really nice because I got a background in statistics, but really I got to focus on how that was applied into real world scenarios. And it's a bit different from the sort of mathematics or computer science background, which is more common in the data science sphere. But it's one where I really feel like the application of that mathematical construct into the real world gives me a lot of value. And then I moved from there, working for the NHS, and I was working at Drug
Okay.
and Alcohol Institute and doing a lot of their data science work. And I found that really meaningful, really, impactful. And it was amazing to see the impact you had on individuals just for doing things that are a little bit more removed than what maybe the clinical staff were doing. So it was really impactful for me, and I really liked that side of things. But then I decided, I wanted to get some more experience, a bit more corporate experience, but also that part of the NHS was quite a small part. So I wanted to get some more experience using much larger data sets, much larger industry, and so on. So I went to work for an insurance company.
Okay.
And that was, yeah, insurance can be one of those things where people say, why would you go work for an insurance company if you want to be a data scientist? Um, but actually, it was really, really good. And there's a few things why that's the case. I mean, there's tons of data. Insurance companies have tons and tons of data, and they're just waiting for people to do something with it. And there's tons of opportunities there as well. And we can discuss some of those a bit later on. But for me,
Yeah, yeah.
it was just about getting that access to that larger infrastructure, those larger data sets, a bit more of the stuff which is more sort of big data, if you like, rather than what I was doing a lot of in the NHS, which was working in this sort of smallish function. The NHS is a bit of a strange entity in that it's a huge organization, but it's very fragmented into these smaller different organizations across the UK.
All right. So you just gave out the example of, NHS, and you told me that, everything was fragmented data. So
Yeah.
asking you as a data scientist, do you enjoy, working on big data, or do you enjoy working on, the fragmented data, like, small kind of an approach? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. My personal experience is I don't have a preference, but at that point in my career, what I wanted to do is get as much experience as I could, and as much variety in that experience as I could. And having one experience at one end, I didn't really know if I would prefer doing more big data things or what it might be. But I wanted to get that experience and see if I could. And I feel quite privileged in terms of like my background and my first experience in the data science sphere because what I was able to do is I was able to play with a lot of different tooling, a lot of different capabilities, a lot of different use cases. And the thing which I discovered that I like is variety.
Okay.
ironically. So it wasn't that actually, I wanted this or I wanted that. I just wanted the variety to be able to experience those different things as well.
That's really amazing. I mean, every time you require versatility and variety in whatever you do, whether it even comes with the day-to-day work that you do. So I really love the way you just put it. Now, heading on for the other one, the main thing, let's say the main thing that you're currently based out of, or let's say the thing that you're currently focused on. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty keen to understand this, Jonathan. Like, what are your roles and responsibilities of being the senior data scientist for your company, Capgemini Invent?
Yeah, yeah. So, well, yeah. So just to finish my timeline a little bit. So I moved from the insurance company to consultancy because I wanted that variety, and I've really found that I've worked for Capgemini in the UK, Capgemini in Norway as well. I've worked for Insights and Data, which is the more data side to things, and now I work for Invent, which is the more traditional management consultancy side to things.
Okay.
And the thing which appealed to me about it, and the thing which reflects like my day-to-day activities, is the diversity of opportunities. So at the minute, I have two different roles. One of them is in the AI Futures Lab, which is the 1 to 3 year view of what the future of AI looks like for Capgemini, and how do we try and take that vision and those thoughts and put them into practical things that we can give to our consultants and our clients that deliver value for them. And the other one is that delivery of value itself. So, what are the things that we're building, whether it be a function or a use case? How do we deliver that out? What's the strategy that we want to impact, we want to help our customers with and our clients with?
Okay.
So, it's a really nice mix between what is a little bit slowing down sometimes and thinking about things versus what is client delivery. And often that balance is something that I see, different people within the same kind of role as me having a different balance of. It might be that they end up doing a lot more delivery tasks, in which case they're focused on sort of day-to-day delivery and achieving those outcomes. But I feel really fortunate that I get to work as part of the Air Futures Lab and slow down a little bit more and think a little bit more about what it is that we're trying to do and how we're trying to do that as well.
That's pretty much insightful, Jonathan. Now, Jonathan, I mean, as a data scientist, as a budding data scientist myself, I'm keen to ask you, like, what is with respect to lab, that is referred to as data science? Because when it comes to lab, I only remember about, the scientists working there. I know, yes, we also have the word scientist associated with that, but how is lab connected with the data science work? I mean, just help me understand that.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're really touching on something which I really like, and this is where like my background in biology really kind of becomes a lot more pertinent to the role of a data scientist. I think a data scientist job is really experiment, try and understand what's going on, try and apply the knowledge that you have of an industry into a particular application, and try and get value out of it in that way. And that is what a lab is. A lab is a place where people go and they experiment. They try and see what works, what doesn't work. They take the learnings
Okay.
from that and they disseminate them to the world to increase the wider knowledge. And that's what we're doing within the AI Futures Lab. That's what scientists do in labs. And that's what data science really, for me, fundamentally
Yes.
is.
Yeah.
You have some people who might work in just sort of building particular applications or things like that. But the data science as a field, I still think has that element of research and experimentation behind it.
Amazing. That's pretty good to know. Now, when we talk about the lab, I mean, is the work that you're doing is, related to the system, or let's say with respect to computers, or is it something that you're doing manual there, with respect to the data sheets and also, tell me more about that.
Yeah, yeah. So I can talk about a couple of recent things that we've done that illustrate the kinds of work that we do. So one of them, we did a lot of work on agentic AI, and agentic AI is the buzzword of 2025.
Yes. Yes.
So what we wanted to do is we wanted to sort of cut through the hype and say what are the things which are really important. And we spoke a lot about communication mechanisms and how to get agents to communicate well with each other. We spoke a lot about how to get value out of systems, about specialization of agents as well. And what's really interesting is we can then put all that thought leadership together and then publish it publicly. So we published our agentic AI POV, and we actually called it autonomous AI rather than agentic AI because it's all about enabling autonomy through an
Yeah.
agentic framework. But another piece of work that we've done, which shows a little bit the balance, because that one is very technical and very applied, is an ethical piece. What are the ethical components, ethical considerations to being able to build AI responsibly and be able to deliver it and help others do that as well? And how do we have that ethical piece enabling us to get more value from things rather than it being seen as this regulatory or particular
Mhm.
aspect, which can often be referred to as not necessarily allowing us to do the things that we want to do. So that's what some of the stuff that we do in the lab. We also build demos. We also do lots of presentations, speak at conferences, things like that. So it's just about trying to get that knowledge out there as well.
That's fantastic, Jonathan. Now, Jonathan, can you give me a complete overview, or let's say, can you give me a walkthrough with respect to your overall expertise pertaining to the data science space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's an interesting question because when we say AI expertise, like what is an expert? And there's often the stereotype is this sort of technical competence or high technical competence, then you're an expert. And I think that can be the case with some regards, and there's definitely some people I would call AI experts who are very technically competent. But I think the wider question is how do you get value from this technology? How do you get value from the tools that we have around this? And one thing that I really like is Stephen Bartlett, who runs the Diary of a CEO, has this thing called skill stacking. And I think that applies a lot more to me and to where I would say I have a more uniqueness rather than expertise. So I have a biology background. I also can code and have built lots of things and put them into production. I understand the maths behind data science. And if you combined a lot of those things together with that business knowledge as well and being able to apply things to a business, what you
Yep.
have is then you have four particular skill sets there, which I would say are pretty good. So four pretty good skill sets, you combine them together, then you have something which is far more unique. And I really like this idea of skill stacking because instead of just trying to become amazing at one thing, and often you could try to become amazing at one thing, but you probably are going to meet people who are better than you at that one thing. Or at least even if you got to that point, you wouldn't be there for very long before somebody else might be able to be better at that one thing. But I think that uniqueness and focusing on that uniqueness is really where I would say the expertise kind of lies.
That's absolutely interesting. So when we talk about uniqueness, I want to ask you, like, what is that unique, let's say, that USP of you, Jonathan, like that you are very much, expertise with. Like you told me that, instead of having things on a multitude level, we need to be
Yeah,
focused on one particular thing. So according to you, like, I mean, not being too many biased, I mean, you need to be biased about yourself now in this case. So which
yeah.
is that particular attribute or which is that particular skill that you say that, you have won it the most?
Yeah, so I think that for me, the one I've kind of been steering my career towards and really chasing is being able to understand business well enough and on the change management side to be able to enable AI and data science to exist across a company. And
Okay.
this is something which, from an individual perspective, it's almost like teaching a man to fish versus giving one a fish, to take the old analogy. And that's
Yes,
the thing
yes.
that I wouldn't, I would be a bit too arrogant to say that I think that I'm an expert at that thing, but I think that's the thing that I really like and I really want to try and achieve more of. And I've done it in the previous projects I've worked on. I'm doing it as part of the AI Futures Lab. So it's really being able to take what is the value in the world of data science and within the AI sphere and be able to enable other people to build things and get value from that as well, rather than necessarily being someone who's the one doing all of that work myself.
That's fantastic, Jonathan. Now, Jonathan, asking you, like, what is your insight on the role of, let's say the data science in the Norwegian market?
Hmm. Yeah, so when I first moved, as I said before, I moved from the UK to Norway. I felt a bit like I traveled back in time, and I think that's quite an unfair assessment. But a lot of people say the same thing, like, oh, Norway's less mature than perhaps working in London. And
Yeah.
to some extent, that might be true, but I think it's a lot more nuanced than that, personally. The Norway has an incredibly advanced public sector. It's very advanced in sort of energy and maritime industries as well. And in some ways, especially for a small population, it punches way above its weight in the sort of global sphere of things on the AI and data science sphere. And we see that within Capgemini as well. We see some of the leaders of the entire group being based out of Norway, and we see a lot of influence coming from Norway that's influencing things on a group level, even though obviously the most influence is from France, given it's a French company. So in
Yep,
that
yep.
sense, I think there's a lot of good opportunities, and I feel quite fortunate that I didn't move to Norway because of the data science opportunities. I moved because of the lifestyle opportunities, and I'm very
Mhm.
outdoorsy. I love the lifestyle here. But I feel quite fortunate that I found a great place to do data science with lots of opportunities. But what do you think? You've interviewed a lot of people from a lot of different places. How do you find, or what's your observations of the role of data science in different markets? And what are the sort of things that you've observed from that perspective?
I mean, when you ask me about the data science market, right, it's all about sometimes about the geography or let's say about the skill set that they're, affiliated with, or let's say mainly it's about the sector that is, completely booming.
Mm,
If you ask me, especially if it's in Australia, I would say the biggest market in Australia is mining sector. So
mm,
in mining, I believe that a data scientist can be there because he can try to let's say do a lot of data mining. Data mining is one thing because as the name mining gets attributed there, and also getting a lot of let's say big data or let's say
mm,
historical data on how well the mining industry can be efficient, how they can avoid the environmental conditions and how it can be more efficient. So that's the
mm,
thing, and also I would just say the banking sector or like the
mm,
insurance sector. So that's with respect to Australia. And when it comes to my home country, India, I feel every market has its own, has its own take because
mm.
India is a huge market and things keep on differing here. So that's my
Yeah, yeah, of
analogy.
course. Yeah, yeah. Cool, interesting.
Yeah. So I'll pause. I'll just pose that question to you again. So you have worked a lot in Norway and you have interacted with a lot of Norwegian people. So when it comes to a data scientist perspective, how different do you think are the data scientists in Norway? Like, what is their unique attribute?
Yeah, so I think the unique attribute I'd say about data scientists in Norway is the level of independence, the level of curiosity, and intrigue into things. So I've worked with some people from different countries, and I think there's a different culture that comes with those different countries. But the one thing I really like about people that I've worked with in Norway, and this might be true more widely of consultancies in general, but I found it to be very true in Norway, is that level of curiosity and independence with things. So you can ask a question, and then people can go away, do some investigations into that, and really try and figure out, know what it is. And I talked about the lots of opportunities to try and understand or to try and get value from data science. But I think that curiosity is something which I've seen a lot of in data scientists within Norway. I don't know if it's to do with the way that the education system is, the sort of stereotypically socialist agendas of the country, or what it might be. But I think that's and it's something where I feel quite at home because I'm quite curious myself. So I really like being able to just ask lots of questions, figure things out, try and go down different areas, and really follow that curiosity as well.
100%. That is true. I mean, I'll ask you. I mean, don't mind me if I'm asking you this, like a very cheeky side.
Yeah.
I mean, is the data that's collected in Norway, is it in Norwegian language? I mean, this is a myth that I want to just get to be let's say broken from your end.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So me as a someone who moved to Norway not speaking any Norwegian, was a little
Okay.
worried about, how am I going to be working in this environment? And luckily I came with the same company, so I knew I could deliver value for the company, and the company's an international company, but I wanted to make sure that I could work with Norwegian clients and I could work on Norwegian cases. And I found it to be a bit of both. So to some
Okay.
extent, within the data science world, we're a bit fortunate in that like all coding languages are in English basically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and you can get away with it a little bit, but the data might not necessarily be. So a lot of the data, more structured data at least, might well
Hmm.
be, numbers or well structured. So to some extent you can just use it without understanding. But a lot of the more unstructured data, a lot of it
Yes.
is in Norwegian. And we've seen, the market react in a few interesting ways with that as well, with certain Norwegian companies building, bespoke ways of being able to take, large models which deliver a lot of value in English and make them valuable in Norwegian as well. So I would say it's a little bit of a challenge for me, but I also think that it's a good opportunity, and the market is responding in nice ways to be able to help ensure that the value we get from where the industry is going is applied onto things that are in Norwegian as well.
Absolutely. I mean, when it comes to unstructured data, the challenge comes on. But I would say with AI, it's become much more easier now. I mean, before it was a
Yeah,
nightmare for a data scientist, but now it's a blessing in disguise.
yeah, I agree, I agree.
Absolutely. Now, Jonathan, the major thing that I am very much curious is I wanted to understand, like, what has been your source of inspiration, drive, and passion to move into the data science space, and is there any interesting anecdote that's associated with it?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of this guy called Dan Pink, who you may know. He has a theory of motivation, which is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy is the ability to have freedom in the things that you do. Mastery is the ability to become good at something or good at multiple things, as we discussed. And purpose is, as you'd expect, having something that's beyond, just doing it for yourself. But recently he's broken down purpose and made a revision to this theory into big P and little p. And I really like this as well. So on one side, you've got big P, that's like, whether it be climate change or helping the world or whatever it might be. And then little p could just be, helping someone who really cares about this one particular thing or doing a favor for someone or those more sort of like small day-to-day things. And I really like this as a theory because I think it explains a lot of what motivates me. Like if I come across someone who's genuinely really excited about something and really excited about how like data science can impact on their world and what they're doing, then I can get a load of little p motivation from just helping that one person out. And on the other side, I've
Yeah.
worked on the COVID-19 task force in the UK.
Mhm.
So for me, that was obviously a huge big P purpose. So if I can help in any way, the UK help manage that the pandemic at the time, and hopefully I did that to a good extent, then that's obviously very purposeful. So I think from that perspective, I like the big P and I like the little p. And I think the other thing is around my curiosity as well. So like I said before, I like following my curiosity, and I actually have a little bit of a challenge which I like to do with people. I said it to myself, so I feel like it's okay to set it to other people. But the challenge was, okay, if you have the mindset that, I can't find any data science use cases, then often you won't find any. But I wondered if you had the opposite mindset and just said they're everywhere. How do I find all of them?
Yes.
Could you actually, find that many? So I set the challenge to myself, can I find 100 every day? And let's do it for a week or however long it might be. And I started off and I had a few and I was thinking, this is tricky. I'm not sure what I can do here. And then I was sat on the bus on the way home from work once and I saw a flower bed. And in my head, I was thinking, okay, well, what do we need for a data science use case? All we need is a problem, a potential solution, and some mechanism for it being financially viable. So let's take the flowers in the flower bed. So at some point, somebody needs to water them. At some point, somebody will have planted them. There might be, different weather conditions. And then very quickly, I managed to write down maybe 15 or 20 different use cases just on the flowers in the flower bed. And I thought, oh, great, I've got something here. And then it became very easy every day to come up with 100 different use cases. Doesn't mean all of them were pursued, doesn't mean I did anything with them, but just that activity of finding opportunities. And I've tested this on quite a few people. I actually ran a little competition recently. I think my system's broken now, though, because the winner of the competition just put it into ChatGPT, got tons of use cases, and then
Yes.
submitted like thousands every day.
Mhm.
But the process of going through the thinking and really sort of working through it, I think is a really nice one. So from that perspective, I really like it if people can go with that. There's opportunity everywhere, and how do we find it approach, so they can get a lot more from the industry as well.
100%, Jonathan. That's pretty insightful on that. Now, Jonathan, when you were traveling, like, what was the journey like? I mean, as a travel junkie, I'm pretty much keen to ask you, like, what was the place you were traveling from and to? So, which part of the world was that in?
Yeah, so I was going on my bus and the flowers, or in general in my career.
No, I mean, the travel that you were saying that you wanted to find a use case about about
Okay, yeah.
data science and finding the flower beds. So, where exactly was that?
Yeah, so it was just me going to and from work, but I also travel a lot. I visit a lot of places. Obviously, I've moved countries, and I think some of those experiences are really good for being able to challenge your mindset as well and think about, what are the opportunities here? Where do they add the most value? And I think that's where you kind of connect the opportunity finding to the value creation as well. So if, let's say, for example, the flowers in the flower bed, then you might say, oh, well, that's not so much of a big deal in the UK. But in Norway, it might be a huge deal because if you
Yeah,
plant the wrong flowers and the conditions are a little harsher in the winter, then everything dies. Or
it's
it could
ruined.
be
Yeah.
that, depending on the different conditions in different countries, it makes a big difference. And I think we talk about some of the industry sectors. You said mining's big in Australia,
Yeah.
energy utilities is big in Norway and maritime. So being able to apply the opportunities that you found to an area of high value, I think is really like the crux. And if you can do that well, then you can really start delivering value through data science.
That's amazing. I mean, through this conversation, one thing actually piqued my interest. You were saying that, you were part of the UK task force in the
Hmm.
pandemic. So would you like to, elaborate about that experience of yours and how did you, having that lockdown kind of a situation, how did you deal with all of that, all that, those roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm honest, it was hard. And the hardest thing about it was you could see the impact of the decisions you were making very quickly in the world where you were making them. And our job was, as part of the health service, to be able to do as much modeling on the data as we could and come up with the most insightful predictions to try and inform policy. So that was our job. If we can understand what's going on, we can then give that information to the policymakers and people making decisions about the pandemic. And if, regardless of the decisions that they make, if they make decisions fully informed about the consequences of those decisions, that's our job. And
Okay.
I think we did a really good job from that perspective on being able to make predictions about particular outbreaks, how those outbreaks would spread, what are the different conditions that we might put in place. We had a tiering system in the UK. So, what's the impact of that tiering system? What would happen if we put certain local authorities in different tiers of restrictions? And
Mhm.
also, like, what are the different symptoms that people are showing, and how do we ensure that the asymptomatic are actually asymptomatic and they're not just people who are presenting with symptoms that we don't think of to do with COVID? But the other side to the question that you asked, which is a really insightful part of that question, I think, is how does it affect you as the person who's working in that organization during the pandemic? And I really struggled on both sides. On one side, it was like,
Yeah.
I need to be the one who's doing everything perfectly. Like if I go to the shop and I stand in a queue, if I'm then not got to the front door
Mm.
by the time the amount of time you should spend outside has been finished, then maybe I need to go shopping the next day again, rather than like, and the rules were quite strict at different points, and
Yeah.
so really being able to adhere to the strictness of those rules. And you often talk about switching off from what you might do in your job. And what we were doing, we were trying to make, models and mathematical models and make predictions. A lot of those predictions would pertain to, the number of hospitalization, number of cases, and inevitably people dying because of it as well. And it's very hard to switch off from that when you then go out into the world and you see the impact that it's having on people. And we talked about different restrictions, and then restrictions would come in place, and those restrictions would be on you and on your friends and on your family, and they might have different opinions, shall we say, about whether the validity of those restrictions applies. And often you can't even, under that scenario, talk about the data that feeds behind it because that's all very secretive. So
Yep.
it's really hard to kind of maintain that sort of mental balance. Motivation's really easy because you just want to help, but having that sort of
Yeah.
mental, I'm not sure what it is, whether it's well-being or whatever it is quite tricky. And also you can see certain things and certain decisions, and you think, could I have done
Yep.
more? Could it, is there anything I could have done that would have influenced a better outcome here? And hindsight's a great thing, and I think we improved massively on being able to provide insight to the government to be able to make good informed decisions. But there's always that question of could you have done more? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's tricky.
Fantastic. When I actually think about the lockdown period, or let's say 2020 pandemic period, I feel like, it was more like a science fiction kind of a thing. Jokes
Mm-hmm.
apart, but it was something, which was really a tough pill to swallow. And, a lot of things that we were hearing in news, the things were not safe. And it actually, everyone's morale was down. I'll be very honest with you. Everyone's morale was down. And we were like, when are we going to get out of it? But thankfully, touch wood, we came out of it, and everyone just bravely acted. And also, it was a very tough period for the world, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel, such dark days touch wood should never come back,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
the most difficult days that anyone can deal with. I'll tell you something, Jonathan. I completed my masters. Then I'm a double masters myself. I was doing my MBA, and I just completed my MBA, and I was looking for jobs, and everything was so tricky. I was joining webinars. I was doing multiple things. So for
Mm.
me, for someone who started his journey then, and suddenly the pandemic getting stuck, I'm like, oh god, it's such a different thing. How do I maneuver? I just started my journey, so how do I maneuver from such a confusion period? But yeah, it is what it is, and it just went over, and here I am doing the
Yeah,
podcast with
yeah.
you.
Yeah, yeah, but I think it affected so many people in so many different ways. I think there were some beautiful bits about that period and people coming together and really sort of, trying to stick in there and have that sort of spirit that we can get through this together. We
Yep.
saw people collaborating in incredible ways. Like we were very fortunate we could work with almost any university professor around there, just everyone just wanting to help and do something together. But of
Yep.
course, there was the other side to it as well, and that physical and mental toll that it's still taking on people.
Yeah.
So definitely a very challenging period.
It was a challenging period, but the people who are part of the university, which we were just talking about, I think that is true optimism, and I think people should learn, from
Mm,
them as a team, because at such a time everyone's morale just goes down, but still they just they stood up and they said, no, we're going to tackle this. And
yeah,
I really, really love their optimism, and I really say, from my behalf, you should just tell them that I told them this. So that's the
yeah, yeah,
that's what I really totally admire. Now, Jonathan, like you were just giving me a complete plethora of use cases that in this podcast session. Now you had this experience of working in fields of medicine, IT, and insurance. Now,
yeah.
as a data scientist, I just wanted to understand, like, what were the fundamental differences that you have observed with respect to the data analytics and data science there?
Yeah, so I think the easiest place to start when we talk about the differences between different sectors or different areas where I've got some experience is by talking about what production looks like. And so we talked about COVID-19 a little bit. So the method of production there is about making, um, models or whatever it might be to inform
Yep.
policy. And the method of production is policy changes. But that's very different from what it might be with, I've just finished work doing on a project with one client, and then we've productionized a chatbot. So that's a very computational way to productionize data science. And that's very different to being able to provide insight or reports to change policy.
Okay.
And another example is just knowledge. So there's one model that I worked on recently, and that was a benchmarking model. What they wanted to understand is, how much should these kind of projects cost? And we could take data that they had and make predictions of what it might be, even if it's a project that we haven't necessarily seen before, based on certain characteristics and similarities between other ones. And they didn't want, information to make policy changes. They didn't want reports or anything like that. They didn't want something productionized in a really, a really high performing way to be available 24/7 and from that perspective, all they wanted was one number to go into a meeting with and some understanding of what that number is telling them. So you can productionize things in many different ways, and I think they're often the differences between how you can look at these different sectors because the modeling itself can be just as applicable across all of them. And that's where
Okay.
we as data scientists fit in a sort of a strange sphere because we can go into any industry, any sector, and still deliver
Yes,
value
that's a blessing. Yeah.
because commonalities of tools, commonalities
Yes.
of approaches, and that's the general data sphere. But then when you get into more how to apply that and how to productionize it, how to get value from it, then you start seeing a lot of these differences play out.
Absolutely. Now, when we talk about, the data modeling and, all about those machine learning algorithms, as a data scientist, which machine learning algorithm that you use the most? Was it, the classification one, clustering, or, was it with respect to the regression model? So as a data scientist, which one did you enjoy the most, when you started using that?
Yeah, so I think if you ask this question, every data scientist that I've met at least has a favorite model. And mine was probably like GBM. It's the one where I feel like I have the most ability to influence its ability to perform well. But we are seeing a little bit of a change at the minute in terms of it used to be a few years ago, data scientists would take a
Hmm.
modeling framework like GBM. They would take some data, they would build some models, and they would productionize those models. I think the
Yep.
shift is now we're taking more pre-built models like large language models and so on, and we're
Yes.
using those and we're building infrastructure around them to try and get the most value from them. And I think the end state of that is where we will combine multiple different approaches, including semantic modeling, including things like Bayesian belief networks and so on, where we'll be able to have a full system, and it might be an agentic AI framework that encapsulates that
Yeah.
system with these different components sat within them. But I'd still say my favorite is probably like GBM, and if you gave me some data and said you need to make a prediction with it, I would probably start with that one. But it's really
Absolutely.
interesting because if you get a bunch of data scientists together, there won't
Yeah.
be a best model for the best use case. And we've done this experiment a little bit as well. So you get, five, six data scientists in a room, give them the same data and the same problem, and say which is the best approach. And whoever gets the best performance or whatever it might be that we're measuring, you could say that that modeling technique is the best approach. But if you were to take the person who made that model out the room and say you have to use this approach and give it to the other five or whatever it might be, often you'll get that they get better performance doing the thing that they know better rather than the thing
Yes.
which it is just the one which overall was better. And I think then we really start getting into the nuance of the conversation is it doesn't really matter so much about which is the best modeling technique as long as they're all applicable modeling techniques. What matters is the ability of the people using them to exploit them and get the value from them in order to deliver what needs to be done for a particular use case.
Indeed, that's absolutely true, Jonathan. Imposition shouldn't be done.
Mm,
Whatever they are capable. I mean, that call should come from inside. If you're really ready that you want to do it, then I mean, nothing is better than that. But if
yeah.
you just impose that, you need to do it, half of the time he's like, okay, what is this? Why should I do this? But when
Yeah,
he
yeah,
knows
yeah,
that, he's like, I know the answer for this, and I can just give you the result pretty soon. So,
yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah. So then, Jonathan, now, I mean, you had a beautiful career, I mean, it started and, it's going pretty good. Now, having said that, in your journey, have you experienced any interesting success stories that you would like to, talk about in this podcast session?
Yeah, yeah. So I can talk about a few of them, and I think that the theme around success stories for me is about how to quantify impact and quantify value. And to some extent, you can get lucky sometimes. So I worked on one fraud model, and very quickly we found a really highly expensive claim that we managed to prevent them from paying out on. And the difference there is if you pay out, then you need to spend a lot of time getting that money back. Or if you don't pay out, then you're still in control, and then you can
Okay.
still have a bit more control over that as a process. So
Yeah.
you can get lucky, and getting lucky is a good thing. Another one that I worked on, which was really interesting, is about how it changes humans' behavior. So we had a telematics product, which is young drivers in the UK driving around and having their driving data recorded. We built the optimization of that data in order to score journeys on whether they're good, bad, or average. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to we wanted to drive, excuse the pun, the behavior towards having people driving really well and having fewer and fewer, of the bad journeys. And it's really interesting from that perspective because then your mechanism for delivering value is about changing humans' behavior. So you need to have lots more mechanisms in place. So the the company we were working with, they would bring these people, they would talk to them, they would explain why they got these scores and so on. We would give reports about driver performance, and then you could really see the behavior of the collective changing and driving much better. And
Yep.
then you can say, okay, well, the other side, just doing something really simple and delivering a number, like the benchmarking one that we spoke about. So for me, the biggest success stories are always the ones where you can get written down value that the business signs off on, that it has been delivered. And from that perspective, I really think change management is probably more important than maths in the world of data science and delivering value. And I've
Okay.
seen other people come in and organizations change where they say, we need to scale down our data science. This is this is that. And if you have business who said, no, this is giving us this much value, it's really hard to
Right.
argue with. So that should be the aim of really success within this field. And I think the two narratives that you often hear is, we have a POC graveyard, we've done a load of stuff that didn't deliver any value. And the other one is, oh, we found out the secret sauce and everything was perfect. And I think in reality, it's a lot more blurred lines between those two. I think
Yeah.
what a lot of people misinterpret perhaps is what value really is. And they think of value as top line, bottom line. But also value can be the lessons that you've learned, the experiences that you've had, the things that you've tried. And it goes back to what we were talking about before about data science, being experimental,
Yes.
and being able to learn and improve. And it's really about that as a process. So it's not about just doing lots of stuff and eventually randomly something will hit. It's about doing things in a really conscious manner to learn from them, improve, and iterate over time in order to get that value. And then when you start getting it, write it down, document it, lock it in, and shout from the rooftops about how amazing it is.
Yes, that is absolutely true. Now, Jonathan, if I have to ask you, like, I mean, how is the life cycle of a particular data scientist? Or let's say, how does a data scientist start his work? So how would you like to frame it? Like, with respect to the requirement gathering to the end product. So, I'm pretty much aware of the fact that, there's a software development life cycle. So for a data scientist, how would you like to, narrate that particular flow?
Yeah, I mean, you can simplify it into its simplest components, which is you need to find a problem, you need to understand that problem, you need to get some data, and then do something with that data. Although that's not entirely the case. You've got different mechanisms like, you could use large language models or some of the more Gen AI things without any starting data. You could build reinforcement learning engines and so on without any starting data. But generally speaking, you want to get some data to try and understand the problem that you're facing. Then you want to build something. My approach is just to build the quickest and simplest thing you can, and then give it to people and start getting feedback, and then iterate on that and work with it. And really in that full fail fast, try everything, experiment, get feedback, and as much feedback as you can from people who are going to be using it as the end product, as those customers, and then be able to sort of document that as a journey, put it into production, make sure it's really well maintained in production, that you've got good monitoring on it, that you understand the kind of challenges that might be faced, whether that's a more software perspective or whether that's a more data science and modeling perspective. What are the things which are likely to happen in the future? How do we anticipate them? How do we monitor them? And so on. So that's very high level. I think
Okay.
we, as data scientists, we can come in at any point along that road. And we see this a lot in consultancy, actually, where it might be that we come in right at the end. Someone rings us up and says, look, we've had a model, we put it in production, it delivered some value, and it suddenly started doing things that we're not sure about. And we want someone to come in and have a look at it. And then we're coming in right at the end on the monitoring and maintenance side to try and understand what's happened there. It could be that we come in right at the beginning and there's not even ideas. We might have to sit there, do ideation sessions with business because they think we should be doing some more in this area. We've done some overall
Yeah.
benchmarking or whatever it might be. Other people are getting more value out of this technology than we are, and we want to understand how we can start getting more value there. So from a data science perspective, it could really be at any of those points that you come in. But for me, I personally enjoy being in right at the very beginning and trying to see it all the way through. But that is a little bit of a challenge within consultancy. So one of the things that also motivates me is seeing people use the things that you've done. And I think that's pretty common. I think most people are motivated by seeing that the work they've done has value and is being used. And as a consultant, you might come in for just a bit of that process. Then you don't see anything before, you also don't see anything after. So it could be that you just hope what you did was useful. You might hear through the grapevine or whatever that other people are using it, but you don't necessarily really see the impact that it has day to day on a business or on the people using it.
100%. That absolutely explains the point. Now, Jonathan, for the people who are pursuing into the data science space, do you feel that learning Python is a must, or do you feel that without Python, they can maneuver their way around? So, what is your
Yeah,
take on?
it's a really good question, especially at the minute where we're seeing vibe coding tools and other tools come in and really lower that boundary or lower that barrier to people getting into this industry. What I'd like to say to people and what I like to focus on is what's the overall trend and how do we understand that trend in order to be able to deliver value as data scientists. And I think the trend there is not just that you used to have to need to code and now you don't need to code. It's the overall trend is the barrier to being able to build things has been dropping a lot. in small chunks or in big jumps, as we've seen with some vibe coding tools. So I remember when I first started as a data scientist, people would say Python's cheating. You're just using packages somebody else has made. You don't even need to understand the math that sits behind it in order to actually use any of these things. And there was this big debate when I started only around 10 years ago around whether actually you need to understand math in order to be a data scientist. And my opinion on that is it definitely helps. If you understand the math behind what you're trying to do, you can understand how to manipulate it to
Exactly.
get what you want. And I think that's still the case. I still think, you can vibe code things, you can build things, but if you understand fundamentally what's happening behind the scenes, you'll be able to do that much better than someone who doesn't necessarily understand what's happening behind the scenes. But
Yes.
it doesn't mean that you need to fundamentally become an amazing coder or become really good at being able to build these applications. Like I've often talked about myself as being a bit of a cowboy coder, and I can do something that's like good enough to almost enable everyone else who's better coders than me or whatever it might be to do the bits that need to be done. So I could build something, I could show value, I could make a model work really well. But if you want it to work 24/7 in a full production system, then get a team in of people who are software engineers, get them to build the infrastructure and get it up and running. And I still think that's the case. I still think the way to do this is to have people of different skill sets come together and deliver what you might need to make it really robust and structured. And if you're a data scientist or you're wanting to be a data scientist, then it's not necessary to really learn Python, but learn what data science is, learn what you're trying to achieve with these kind of things, learn as much as you can about the trends that exist in the industry and learn how to apply them. And if you end up getting to that stage, but you still can't code at all, and you build something in a vibe coding tool or whatever it might be, and that thing, you think, yeah, this has started to deliver some value. Maybe this is useful. People in the business like it. People think it's really good. There's no harm in then saying, I've reached the limit of what I can do. I need to get somebody in who's better at coding or whatever that might be. And I think we need to start thinking about the data scientist career or a data scientist skill set as a little bit more diverse, as this is what we'd want our data science team to have, rather than this is what we want our data scientists to have. And I think that's really important because if you say, oh, a data scientist should have this, should have this, should have this, should have this, the list that you end up making, and you see this on some job adverts, it's
Okay.
like
Yeah.
no one exists on the planet who can do all these things. And then you have other people and you go into an interview and they're like, yeah, we're looking for people who maybe get about half of what we've put on the list.
Hmm.
And that's really interesting because what that's really telling you is what you've got in your job advert is what you want your data science team to have. The individuals that sit within that team should complement each other with the experience and the skills that they have.
Right.
So find an area that's interesting to you. If you want to be a data scientist and you really hate coding, that's okay. Just be good at the other stuff. Really, be curious in those areas and emphasize that when you're coming into an interview or when you're coming into a position to say, I'm not the best coder in the world, but this is what I think I'm good at and this is what I think I can bring in. And if that's what your team needs, then I can be useful to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a very right point, Jonathan. Now, Jonathan, I mean, how do you see the use case of AI? I mean, how do you see the future of AI as a
Mhm.
practical use case?
Yeah. So we do a lot of time, we spend a lot of time thinking about the future of AI. And I think from my perspective, I'm definitely more positive than perhaps others. So I think there's tons of opportunities and we've got lots of opportunity now to really focus on the things which matter in the world of AI. So some themes that I've kind of seen that I think are really pushing in a positive sense is around talking about performance rather than capability. So we see a lot of people at the minute talking about, I want AI to do this for me, or look at this amazing AI, it can do this. And we don't necessarily see as much nuanced conversation about how well it can do those things. And that's the change that I think is coming in the next sort of year, maybe year or two. And I think that's going to be really beneficial. So we start asking the question, like, how good is it at doing these things? How do we get it to perform better rather than just, can it do that thing? Oh, great, it can, but maybe not all the time, or maybe not to a great level.
Yeah.
I think another thing which is coming in, which is really useful as well, is more of the systems approach. It's not about, oh, here's an AI and that does the job for me. It's just what's the wider system? How do these different AI fit within that system? And how do we create an approach? And this for me is basically what agentic AI promises. It doesn't promise a whole bunch of single AI agents doing things in
Right.
isolation. it promises multiple different AI agents and non-AI entities or agents, as well as whatever it might be, even humans within certain processes, if it makes sense to have them working as a collective as part of a system. And then what you start to understand is what's the impact of this particular AI at this particular point on different parts of that system, and how do we get a system that works really well rather than just individual AI that works really well. I think there's a couple of other things as well. One is
Yeah.
around sort of sustainability in AI. And I think this is an interesting one where we've seen an explosion of consumption and everyone's saying this is unsustainable. It's, not possible to, there's no hope. AI is just taking over all the energy and everything like that. And there is a converse to that as well. And I think the converse to that is we're seeing the industry drive in a way towards optimization of consumption, optimization of cost. We see that driven by clients. They want AIs that are cost effective. They want, AIs that are energy efficient. And we're also seeing a lot of specialization. So there's a lot of talk at the minute about AGI and artificial general intelligence, but there's just as much talk, if not more, action happening on how to create specialized models to do particular tasks really well. And that model specialization, especially things on edge and doing things a bit close to where the data is being collected, I think that's another trend that's coming in as well. And that's going to be really valuable and really useful. And the
Yeah.
last overall trend that I think that we see is we've kind of entered a world now where knowledge is cheap. And by that, what I really mean is it used to be that if you wanted to know something, you go to a library, you talk to an expert. It was quite hard to get factual information or knowledge about a particular area. Then it became a bit easier. You could Google it, you could look online, you could read certain things. Now you can ask a question, you get a response back. We can talk
Yeah.
about, how good some of these systems are at providing knowledge, but knowledge has become something that's very cheap, and the generation of knowledge as well. So if I was to write something about, how how good is AI at a particular thing, I could get an LLM to write probably a half decent version of that for me, and you start to see a lot of this information feeding into the system. And there's an idea called model collapse, which is as soon as you get a lot more information generated by AI, and then you keep that sort of feedback process, you start to diminish the quality of information within the system, and you start to sort of remove some of the variance as well and some of the variety, because inevitably what the AI is trying to do is predict the most likely next word, and therefore what you get is the most likely answer to a question rather than it necessarily being a full nuance with lots of different opinions. And so then I think we're starting to see a shift away from people trying to be knowledgeable to people trying to show more wisdom. And by that I mean the application of that knowledge into specific environments and their experience of it. And that's why I love these kind of formats, a bit more of a long format podcast series, because I think that's a bit of a symptom of this change that we're seeing is a move away from knowledge into being like, what are your experiences? What are your, how have you applied the knowledge that you have? And how can other people learn from those experiences to get a bit more wisdom in how to do something? So I really like that personally. I think it's a very positive change. And I think it's one which is
Exactly.
really going to drive the narrative forward. And people like yourself are doing a great job of really driving that narrative as well.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. That really means a lot, and actually, it uplifts my my confidence now to do even better in my next podcast episodes for sure. Now, Jonathan, I mean, you just have experienced the best of the data science. Now, having said that, like, what are your future plans ahead? What is your future roadmap? Like, what are the things that you want to cover in the data science space, or let's say, do you want to move into some other technology? What is your take now?
Yeah, so for me, I've always followed my curiosity, and I think that's always served me quite well. Right now, the things that I'm curious on are some of the more technical aspects within the AI world and how to get AI working really well. And I think that's an area which I'm really interested in. There's the ethical and responsible area, which is another area I'm really interested in. And I'm a bit fortunate at the minute that I'm in a position where I can explore these areas and I can do a little bit more of that more specific deep diving that perhaps other people who have similar kind of job titles to me don't get the opportunity to do. So from my perspective, I think those areas and some of the more nuanced areas within the data science and AI sphere are the ones which I'm looking to spend more time in and really develop my own knowledge in it, and then hopefully share that knowledge with others. I think the general trend that I'm kind of seeing within my wider career is how do I take the knowledge of an industry, my experience, and use that to help others and teaching someone how to fish rather than giving them the fish. And I think that's probably the
Yes, yes.
maturing that people have throughout their careers is probably not something that's too specific to me. So I would hope my future is a bit more teaching people to fish, trying to decipher some of these more complex ideas, and trying to sort of look for where the value is in the data science sphere, where the hope is for some of the challenges that we have, and how we can help other people navigate some of that space as well.
Absolutely, Jonathan. I'm pretty sure that you're going to reach there, and definitely you're going to help a lot of people, especially people like me, who are in the data science space, and probably all the aspiring data scientists. And I mean, you're really an inspiration for them, to try on different hands-on experience with respect to the data space. Now, you know, uh, before we conclude our podcast session, Jonathan, like let's take a lighter route. All this while I was totally bombarding you with questions of data science,
Yeah,
about AI, about your journey and everything. Now we're going to take a lighter route, nothing technical, just, just about your likes and interests. So are you
yep,
ready with the first question of the rapid fire round, Jonathan?
go for it.
All right. Okay, Jonathan. So since, since you're from UK, so I'm keen to ask you this, like, what is your favorite football team?
I'm a Sunderland fan, so I used to have to explain who they were. I don't have to do that anymore because now we're doing really well, and they're bossing it from everything that is happening this year at least. So that's really nice. But my grandpa's from Sunderland. I'm originally from Manchester, but I used to go watch
Okay.
the football with him, and no one chooses to be a Sunderland fan. It's more like that's just what you are, and but I really enjoy it, and it's really nice to kind of follow a team. I'm not sure my wife enjoys it. She says you just live in different states of either being really happy or really sad depending on the football result. I think that's probably true of a lot of people's partners. But we had a very bad period a few years ago, so she wasn't very happy
Yeah.
about me being a Sunderland fan then. But I'm very happy now. So
I mean, that's pretty good. Even there wouldn't have been any explanation. I mean, if you wanted to, tell me about what Sunderland is, because I've been following the Premier League since years, and I was like wondering, like, where have they been all these years? And now they're
yeah,
back with a bang, and I wish they go really well and be a threat to all these big clubs in in UK.
yeah, yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Now, talking about Sunderland, like, if you have to, pick out the best player that that you like to watch, who would that be?
Yeah. For me, it's Xhaka. I like the way he controls the game, and I also like the way that he makes everyone around him so much better as well. And I was so excited when we signed him because I knew he was going to do that.
Okay.
The thing which frustrates me a little bit actually is you have like fantasy Premier League and things like that, and it just it doesn't translate into like people like him getting the value that they deserve. And I'm sure ex-professionals, people, pundits, and they talk about Sunderland. They see what he does and the value that he provides to the team. But I think to some extent, he's a little bit of one of those unsung heroes. He's not the one that scores all the goals. He doesn't necessarily do all of the flashy stuff or anything, but everyone
Yes.
around him is better when he's there. And the control that he gives us in a game is
Yeah.
incredible.
Fantastic. Now you told me that your grandfather is a huge Sunderland fan. So do you
Yeah.
have any first-hand memories of visiting a Sunderland game during your childhood?
Yeah, so I also remember, I think the first time I ever watched Sunderland, I can't remember how old I was, but I'd have been very small. And they were only playing on certain channels, but there was someone up the street of where my grandparents lived that had Sky, and they were like, "Oh, you're visiting, you should come watch Sunderland." So it was a tiny living room, maybe at best fit 5, 10 people or something like that. You have the whole
Okay.
street just crowded in. There's like 30 of us because everyone's a Sunderland fan in Sunderland.
Oh, wow.
Exactly. So it's really fun. And I was one of the kids at the front. There were some other kids, and there was loads of like sweets and things like that. I can't remember the game. I can't remember the score. I think that's one of my
Okay.
earliest memories. And I also remember I went to see Sunderland play at Old Trafford against Manchester United, and I mean, I think they put out their reserve team and they still beat us quite comfortably. But yeah, that
Yeah.
was an incredible experience to sort of go there with my family and watch them play at this huge stadium. So that was one advantage of growing up in Manchester, and I got to see them play in lots of different stadiums around the Northwest as well.
Nice, nice. I mean, I've not been to the UK, but I really want to visit UK. And the first stadium that I would like to see would be Old Trafford. And then,
Yeah,
from the maneuver my way even across, probably even if it's Scotland, seeing the Celtics or Rangers, because that's a huge rivalry, I think, in Scotland, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge rivalry. Yeah.
So definitely, I have my thing in the bucket list for sure. Now, Jonathan, since I'm from India and I'm of the Indian origin, so I'm pretty keen to ask you this: like, what is your favorite Indian food that you always like to try?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When I grew up, and I grew up in, Manchester, I didn't really like spicy food or anything like that. So if you'd have asked me this question when I was much younger, I would have probably said I don't really like Indian food. But then I went to
Okay.
India, and I was traveling
Okay.
around India for a few weeks, and oh, I loved everything I ate. It was incredible. So
Oh,
I started off and we went through the north, and then we got a train down to Bangalore, and we spent some time a bit further south as well. And we were only there a few weeks, but since then, I'm obsessed. I love Indian food now. So maybe something simple like a dansak or something like that. But for
okay.
me, I think trying lots of different things, and the thing I think Indian food is really good at is about having lots of flavor without
Mhm.
necessarily just overpowering with like one flavor or something. And I
Exactly.
think that was a bit of a thing for me probably growing up where I probably just didn't have good Indian food. It was just like, oh, this is really
Yeah,
spicy.
yeah.
This is just overpowering
I
one
can relate to
flavor.
that.
Yeah, versus actually having this blend of flavors which just takes make have a party in your mouth or something when you're eating some of this stuff. There's so much taste.
Actually, if you want to have a good Indian food, I know a place
Yeah.
in Norway, in Oslo. I'm not
Okay.
from Oslo, but being a non-Oslo, away from Oslo, I've actually been to an Indian restaurant, and that's called New Delhi. It's
Okay.
it's totally authentic. I think it's one of the first Indian restaurants that they started in Oslo, so that's a good
Awesome.
pick
I'll
for sure.
check it out.
Yeah, it's really good. You have a lot of good flavors there, and a lot of I see a lot of I see a non-local Indians there.
Mm,
All the Norwegian people I see, and they just love the Indian food. And I was like,
mhm.
wow. So I've been
Yeah,
with
yeah.
my family and with my cousins. So we were surprised to see, near the boardwalk. Almost it's exactly near the boardwalk, and you just have this restaurant called New Delhi, and I was like, wow, this just feels like something else.
Yeah,
So
I'll definitely check it out. Nice. Thanks for the tip.
definitely, definitely, Jonathan. Yeah. So, Jonathan, I mean, if I have to, ask you a particular question, like, what is your favorite movie franchise? Then what would that be?
Favorite movie franchise? I'm a bit of a sucker for the Lord of the Rings. So it's a
Okay.
classic, and I watched it so much as a kid. I went to New Zealand for my honeymoon with my wife, and I dragged her
Okay.
around all of the different Lord of the Rings sites. And we went to Hobbiton, and Hobbiton's incredible. If you get a chance, they just opened up a Hobbit hole as well. So we got a little tour
Oh,
around
wow.
one of the Hobbit holes, and it was incredible. And that it was funny on the flight there. We spent, I can't remember how long the flight was, like 36 hours in total or something like that. I just watched every single film almost on repeat all the way through on the flights when I wasn't asleep. So for me, yeah, I love Lord of the Rings. I would say that one wins. I think the way that they did it, the attention to detail, the sets that they built, just incredible.
Absolutely. That's a very creative aspect for sure. Now, suppose, if people, I mean, I've already visited Oslo and would love to visit again, but if
Hmm.
people want to visit Oslo, what is the travel recommendation that you would like to, give them?
The travel recommendation. I think it depends on what you're into, but I think Oslo can kind of switch between different people if they're interested in different things. So if I was going to give a little itinerary which covers a little bit of everything, then I would say there's a couple of great museums, the Fram and the Kon-Tiki. They're about, exploration into the sea of different ships and adventures of trying to get to the Antarctic first and so on. They're great museums. They've got the ships there. It's incredible to read about what they've done. I'm a sucker for saunas myself, so if you're coming, especially in the winter, try ice
Mhm.
bathing, but do it when you have a nice hot sauna nearby, because the sea gets real cold. So
Yeah.
you try it, but make sure you have somewhere warm to go in the sauna afterwards. I think that's really nice. There's
Yep.
also like some reasonable skiing, given that it's a capital city, and there's some other good ski resorts that are a couple of hours drive away from Oslo. So I think skiing is a good one if you're into skiing.
Right.
And Oslo is super outdoorsy. So if you're an outdoorsy person, you want to go for a hike, you come in the summer or something like that, then it's an amazing place to just hike through the forest. It's really easy to get out of Oslo as a city center if you're not interested in the sort of city center and you want to explore a little bit, yeah, the outdoors and the wildlife.
Yeah. That's a beautiful travel recommendation, Jonathan. Now I'll give you two choices here.
Yeah.
So if I mean, with respect to the options, which one would you choose? Would it be the beaches or would it be the mountains?
Mountains for me. So mountain, I more enjoy adventure kind of holidays. So if you gave me hiking across mountains for a few days on end, or sitting on a beach drinking cocktails, then I would choose the mountains
The
all day.
mountains. That's a good pick. Now, the final question to you, Jonathan, like, what was the last song that you have heard on your playlist?
The last song. I'm often renowned by my friends for having terrible taste in music. So I like house, maybe like Clubland and those kind of things. And I go through phases of liking, different songs depending on it, but it's all kind of in that genre. So for me, it's more like DJs and sort of radio edits and things like that.
Okay.
So I can't remember the sort of like favorite song, but then I also have like random songs that I really like that are not related at all. So like
Yeah.
yeah, some random things from like Pink or whatever it might be. So I think my music taste is a bit peculiar, or at least my friends tell me it is. So yeah.
Everyone has their own musical taste, so there's nothing to be judged about. So, I mean, I'll add one more question to this. Like, what are the
Yeah,
three songs that you would like to pick that you always love to, hear out? The three songs,
three
your favorite three
songs.
songs.
Um, Tricky. I think I'm a big fan of Kygo, and I went to see Kygo live in Oslo actually, and that was incredible. So I think you can probably pick a couple of his songs into that mix,
Okay.
and maybe add a little bit of something a bit different. I went to see Dermot Kennedy in Dublin live, and that was really good. So Dermot Kennedy, I would highly recommend, and yeah, probably his just his most common songs and most well-known songs, but there would be my two recommendations, something a little bit different on both sides.
Fantastic. That's amazing, Jonathan. So, Jonathan, finally, thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule and being part of this beautiful podcast session. And I just loved everything talking about data science. And the thing that actually literally blew me off was your entire expertise on data science. Everything we were talking about. You gave me different use cases. You were talking about how well this can be applied. What are the sectors that it can be concentrated. How well you have dealt with it. So every insight provided by you was really amazing. And again, the link with AI and how you have that future roadmap for AI, that was again remarkable. So I just had a lovely conversation. And for me, let's say it's like a playbook. I mean, it's like a data science playbook. Taking a lot of cues from your end through this podcast session of mine. So it was lovely collaborating with you. So thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thanks so much for having me, and likewise, I really enjoyed the conversation. It was really nice to talk about these topics, and I really enjoy these kind of formats. And I think what you do is a great thing, and it's really enabling people to have much more awareness and understanding of a topic rather than just trying to give them, these are the facts of the situation or anything like that. So
Yeah.
thanks so much for having me on. Please continue doing what you're doing, and I look forward to more listening to more episodes in the future.
That really means a lot, Jonathan. Really, that I mean, that actually, adds a huge boost for my podcast initiative and for my team, who's based out of, helping me out with this day-to-day work. And I really, really appreciate your time. And yeah, so listeners, on this note, this is your host Akhil Navluri signing off. We would be back with another podcast episode with another eminent industry leader very soon. Till then, keep listening. Goodbye. Stay tuned and au revoir. Thank you.